This is Universal Lunch Out of Office Hours, a limited-run live-stream web series on the occasion of Futurespective, an exhibition with events and happenings that demonstrate how design inquiry engages in open-ended, extradisciplinary exchange. Futurespective runs through December 14th at the Institute of Contemporary Art at the Maine College of Art in Portland, Maine. I'm Gabrielle Esprity in New York.
And I'm Jimmy Liu in Austin, Texas. Futurespective asks a simple question. What does it mean to rethink the past in the present to point to the future? And each Thursday, for the duration of the exhibition, we will gather a diverse group of thinkers and makers to kick around answers to this question relative to design, culture, or anything else our guests want to discuss. Gabrielle, hello.
Hello, Jimmy. How are you?
Good. Well, tired and brain dead.
Other than being tired and brain dead, you look fabulous as usual.
Thank you. Thank you. So last week you had Convivium at Futurespective.
Yes,
so
indeed.
I want an update on all the wonderful 100-word abstract and presentation. No, 500-word abstracts, 100-word presentations.
Yeah, we had decided to upend the conventions of an academic conference, and while everybody got 15 or 20 minutes for their papers, they were only allowed to present for 100 words. And they had submitted longer abstracts of 500 words, as you've alluded to, but it really forced people to be absolutely concise and completely spot on. And I have to say, at no point were we at a loss for words, because even when people read their papers, everyone immediately jumped into the conversation, and it was incredibly stimulating. We had 20 presenters, 10 physically in the room, and 10 beaming in from internet land.
Ooh, the best.
Yes, although, as always happens, there was there was technology decay as the day went on, and I think by the time we got to our last presenter, and this, I have to cop to owning this issue of decay, because I had a very old laptop that the only thing it had to do was run Firefox, so that we could have the sort of Ethernet connection, and somehow, out of date security settings, one thing or another. By the time we got to the last papers, we were on an iPhone and listening, and everybody was kind of huddled around. But as a number of people commented, it made it really intimate, and the fact that you had to really concentrate meant that there was this sort of intense engagement with the papers at hand. So it was really great. Everyone was addressing the question that we're asking here: what does it mean to rethink the past and the present to point to the future? But that. Other than that kind of, let's call it chronological continuum, the papers were all over. They dealt with architecture, they dealt with urbanism, they dealt with graphic design, product design, they dealt with the creation of archives, they dealt with questions of race and identity. They were all over the place, and really quite stimulating and thought-provoking in the best way.
Excellent. And will we be able to, as non-attendees, will we be able to see these presentations in some form eventually?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I'm like, you're committing to that right now.
Eventually. Well, again, we had hoped initially to live stream, and it was, in fact, there was an Instagram live stream, but it wasn't archived. But we are collecting the 100 papers, and there are plans afoot to make them available, and perhaps even to get people to read them. We'll see how that goes. I think at the very least, the 100 papers will be made available. The 100-word papers will be made available. And if, as some participants hinted, that they said I shouldn't be surprised to find people kind of nicking the format. So that could be the best possible thing would be to have started a wave of rejecting the conventional premise of the 20-minute paper.
Oh, I love it.
Because you know what happens at every conference you've ever been to, there is never enough time for discussion. And even when you try to do it where we're going to present all the papers and then we'll have lots of time for discussion, everybody ends up talking only about the last person's paper. And so this was really, even though of course we went over because of technology and donuts.
Fueled by donuts.
But I think it actually is a really great format because it does force people to be precise and to say what the most important issue is. Sort of in between shorter than a TED Talk, longer than a tweet.
Yeah, I hope this starts a trend like your own version of Pecha Kucha.
Yeah, it's like that. And I will say though, most people only chose to have one or two images, which I also think was really quite good.
Even better. Yeah.
Because there wasn't that much of a distraction. A couple people had videos playing in the background, but it really forced, let's just say, cutting away the fat. Not that there's anything wrong with fat, because we know that fat adds flavor. But
we're body positive here.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We love the curves. They just have to be concise curves.
Yes. Well, you know what? You should have all these people call your landline and record their 100-word things on your answering machine. That way you can just play the tape. We can just digitize it and it'll just be online. Because they're short enough to read as, to leave us a message, right?
No, absolutely. That'll be the kind of rogue version. Maybe we'll launch that as a holiday gift to everyone. A series of.
Oh, I would love a voicemail from one of these people. You should start a call. That would be great for Christmas. The gift of knowledge.
Yes, like Carl Castle on your answering machine.
Yeah. Yes, they do that on NPR, right?
Yes,
like when you donate, sometimes they'll call your phone.
Yes.
Perfect.
So it was great. It was a nice reminder that the actual physically getting together still has value. Even and I think that despite the fact that folks, because of the degrading, I have to stop calling it the degrading technology, because then people think that it's like the technology was degrading me, which may in fact have been the case. But I think
you were offended.
I was offended by that degrading technology. But even though people who were joining us from afar could only kind of be on for maybe an hour just because it was too hard to hear, I think we were still able to have a really good back and forth. And I went to a dinner when I got back from Portland and was gratified to learn that a friend of mine who had gone to a comparable conference in which it was a group of people in New York and a group of people in London, that sounded as if it was much more organized, et cetera, than ours. He said, yeah, basically the technology gave out and everyone in New York hung out talking to each other, and everyone in London hung out talking to each other. And I thought, okay, well, so clearly it's not just us.
It worked out, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, so it was good. It was good. And as always, the conversations continued sort of during the breaks, afterwards at dinner, the next day when people kind of continued on. And then a group of graduate students from NC State, along with Denise Gonzalez-Crisp, were there to continue that conversation during a 3-day residency that continued until yesterday.
Did their collective have a funny name? I remember this.
It did, the Fugacious Collective. And it turns out that fugacious is a real live word, which, I like to consider myself an OED geek, but I had to ask Professor Gonzalez-Crisp for the meaning of fugacious,
What does it mean? I don't know this word either.
Fugacious means tending to disappear or fleeting. And now I'm that fleeting quality and the sort of almost under the radar, it's the same Latin root as subterfuge and fugitive. So anyway, so yes, it was the fugacious collective. Yeah.
Well, okay. I think we should get on with our guests today.
Absolutely.
So today we have 4 guests. The first 2 are Danielle Aubert and Tuan Phan. Danielle Aubert is a graphic designer whose work examines materials, methods of production, machines, and labor. She's the author of Marking the Dispossessed from 2015, published by Passenger Books, and 16 months worth of drawings in Microsoft Excel from 2006, published by various projects. She is co-author with Lana Kavar and Natasha Chandani of Thanks for the View, Mr. Mies, which Gabrielle is holding up, from 2012, published by Metropolis. Danielle is an associate professor of graphic design at Wayne State University in Detroit. And from 2013 to 2015, she was a fellow in the creative and performing arts at the Lewis Center for the Arts at Princeton University. Her new book, The Detroit Printing Co-op, published by Inventory Press, is available for pre-order now and ships in November.
And Tuan Phan is a graphic design freelance dabbler, off-time semi-socio-political graphical activist, and a full-time graphic design teacher. He's an assistant professor of graphic design at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, which means he is a colleague of our indefatigable co-host, Jimmy Liu. And he arrived in Texas, in Austin, by way of El Paso, Omaha, Pasadena, Kingwood, Seabrook, Houston, and Valencia. His current project, Collar Criminals, uses the structure of social media, specifically Instagram business accounts, to critique capitalism and the, quote, professional managerial class, which thankfully those of us in the academy can pretend we're outside of. Danielle and Tuan, welcome to Universal Lunch.
Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
I'm real excited to get a little political with you guys today. Not that we normally don't get political here on Universal Lunch, but I suspect that we are in the company of comrades today. So we're going to talk a little bit about labor and the relation to design. But before we get to that, I kind of want to hear from both of you about where that political thread began for both of you. And so at Universal Lunch, we're interested in not just the work that you're making, but also the ideas that feed that work. And so can each of you trace a line maybe backwards through your education to your formative years and try to unpack any experiences or institutions or people who might have shaped what we might call your particular school of thought? And so what can each of you tell us about how your particular perspective as designers who are interested in social issues was formed? Who wants to go first? Just jump in.
Danielle, go first.
First of all, is the audio okay? Because I couldn't find my headphones.
Yeah, I think you're coming through okay, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for having me on this. I'm really excited to do this. And hello, it's good to see you all.
Hello.
Yeah, so I my own political trajectory or background, I guess, is ongoing and evolving. But I think I read a lot of. I was sort of always interested in sort of political texts in college and things like that, and dabbled in activism. But I didn't really get fully involved, or didn't feel like a sense of urgency until really moving to Detroit in 2005 and sort of getting a sense of the like extreme effects of disinvestment and wealth inequality and systematic racism and all of the things that are at play here. But then again, in 2016, when Trump was elected, I think it felt like, okay, you cannot play around and just show up at protests that other people organize. Like, you have to figure out what's going on. So then I sort of went through more kind of in an organized way to figure out what kind of political organizing is happening in Detroit and where I could plug in. And I felt like it has to be more than me just making posters for like, and then showing up at something. So I've become very involved in the last since 2016, kind of in different social movements. So I mean, it had started before that, but I feel like that was like the big push.
Yeah, so a kind of catalyst necessary to go from a kind of support role to feeling much more like you're on the front lines of activism. Yeah,
and also trying to figure out, as a graphic designer, what I can do. So I kind of came to I personally kind of ended up getting very involved in the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialists of America, like the chapter here in Detroit, and also my own union. I read a book by Jane McKelvey that's like No Shortcuts, How to Build Power in the Gilded Age or something. And I went to a lot of different groups, like kind of like nonprofit groups where you're like, okay, this sounds like it'll be good. And then you go and be like, it feels like it's like not enough. We need there's like class war going on. We need like to fully engage, and who has those tools? And the union movement is, weakened, but it has tools and it has infrastructure. And then the socialism is like unapologetic and it's not funded by foundations or like philanthropists. So like it's like self-funded and it's explicitly anti-capitalist. So I feel like that's how I so I'm trying to kind of organize in those two spaces primarily now. And then graphic design, I can talk about this later. I feel like Tuan should talk.
Well, let me just ask one follow-up question. When you referred to union, is that a teachers union at Wayne State, or is that a graphic designer teachers union? So like the PSA or... I'm interested in teachers, and I'm interested in graphic design unions as well. And I have been for a long time. Even, I had a group for a while with Lana Kavar. We called ourselves the International Typographical Union, and we were like but it was always sort of like historical. Like it was like, oh, like that's so cool. The ITU was so powerful for so many years. It doesn't exist anymore, and it felt like it wasn't real, but it was more like wishful. But I think that's happening now too in some, like in England, there's a bit of organizing around graphic design unions, sounds like.
Yeah, I was chuckling earlier when you mentioned the DSA, because Tuan is part of the DSA here in Texas.
Oh, okay.
And we end up talking a lot about the DSA. But I will give Tuan a chance to answer this question about his school of thought.
I'll do a throwback to I think it was last week's interview with Matt Soar. He brought up the First Things First manifesto that was like rebooted around, I guess, 2000s, late
the
90s.
Year 2000, yeah. 2000.
And so, I remember that. And I remember thinking, like something's going to happen in like graphic design, because I think that was the escalation of like branding at that juncture. Like it moved from identity, like doing identity graphics, to branding. Like corporations were just ramping up to like do that. And it was like, and I wasn't really into that stuff. And so I thought this would be like an interesting counter, to that. And so, but I think Matt talked about how even back in the 80s about how things were just about, let's care about the environment. Let's use recycled paper. And it's like, let's not talk about why we need to make these things in the first place, but let's make these things, but make them recyclable. So, so I was into that First Things First manifesto, the reboot. And then I think it kind of dissipated pretty quickly. Like there wasn't any follow through on like what that was about. But that was the beginning, and so I've been on that kind of trail of like trying to find spaces to make other types of work. And so yeah, a lot of my work has like political dimensions to it, like protest and anti-capitalist sentiments, basically. Yeah.
And in the context of protests and thinking about the political content of your work, is distribution a critical part of that?
I mean, the distribution right now, like that project I'm working on right now, it's moved from, like, I used to do screen printed stuff where you would go out and wheat paste. And I don't know, I'm getting older. I'm getting like the screen printing process is very elaborate, and actually going in the middle of the night to places is like, maybe, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. So I just wanted to try a new realm. And so, yeah, the Instagram, social media platforms, like, I consider it the equivalent of like a digital poster. Basically, I'm buying like ad space, and I'm actually putting some of these graphics in people's streams, whether they want it or not, basically. And so it's just moved to a different platform.
That's so interesting. I mean, I can appreciate that, having not wheat pasted anything since I think 2007, but
whoa, bold, even into 2007.
Oh well, again, it was before Barack Obama's first when he was first elected. It was in response to politics then. But I'm wondering if there's a tension between analog and digital in that sense. Or is there still? Well, is there a value still to that kind of the distribution in a physical space, or have we gotten to the moment where that the kind of Instagram feed becomes the equivalent of the wheat pasting that you might encounter when you walk down the street?
I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as Danielle about there's a certain threshold where you do stuff, right? And I have the analytics of the Instagram stuff, right? Because it's like, it'll tell you how many people clicked, how many people like. And so I don't have any kind of preconceptions about like what people are doing with that. And so I needed to escalate my involvement, and that's why like I became involved in the Democratic Socialists here, the chapter in Austin, about actually doing on the ground active things, knocking on people's door, trying to organize some things, and so having that direct connection and trying to use my design, like I try to help them on social media, like with their stuff, but like direct, like, I mean, that's one of the key terms about direct action, like directly involve yourself in something is the best way, I think.
Well, I want to go back to First Things First 2000. Well, the first one is 1964, and then 2000. I think I wrote about First Things First 2000 in my entrance essay for grad school. I must have. But you're right that it didn't quite take off. Like, it was published by Adbusters, I think, in 2000s. And do you, Tuan and Danielle, do you have thoughts about why you think like why didn't it take off? I mean, people were certainly interested in it, but I mean, my guess, because I've been talking about this exact topic in my design history class last week, is I think the times were too prosperous, or the times were too good. We weren't miserable enough.
The .com rise was around that time. It was like internet boom started around early 2000s. So yeah, if that didn't work out, there would have been more, I think, disgruntled workers.
But I think also there wasn't, I remember reading that like at the gym, I think, and being like, this is great. But I think that it wasn't like a lot of things that there wasn't a clear actionable thing. Like I often liked Adbusters and bought Adbusters, and like I liked that statement. But as a young graphic designer myself, I didn't know what to do with that. And I think maybe Tuan and I are having a similar experience with the DSA and with my union, and like reading these organizing manuals. You're like, it's all about the one-on-one. It's like,
Yeah.
it's very, it's a lot of work to organize and these statements come out and you're like, that's a great statement, but the organizing happens like in other spaces. So I think that I don't know that there was like a movement behind it, or that it was enough to create a movement around itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that both of you have spoken about that kind of one-on-one and the sort of knocking on doors as really, really effective direct action. And one wonders, when you're doing that in a role as a canvasser or organizer, are you still doing design?
Yeah. I mean, I think because the one-on-one is also like the term that they use, and I didn't know this term until like 2 years ago or whatever, but it's like, it's like when you're organizing the union, or like in a thing like DSA, you're trying to get more members, and you're like, okay, this person's come to something, let me make a coffee with this person and find out what their situation is, and I tell them about my situation. And it's the same with like coworkers, like, how long have you worked here, what do you do? And I feel like in these spaces, my role as a graphic designer, a lot of it is like, that's my practice and this is my skill set. And if I'm talking to you and you are like working in, like you're a third grade teacher, or you're a programmer, or you work at, Kroger, like we each have, we're both coming from our kind of like workplaces. And I feel like even if I'm not doing graphic design, everybody like at the DSA knows that I know how to do it. And so, and so that's my skill set, and that's what I can bring. But it's not like that's all I do. It's not like I'm just sitting here waiting for people to give me projects. It's like, you just kind of like, you do all this organizing and you kind of relate to people. Like, we have shabby situations and we're all being exploited in different ways. And then sometimes I'm like, I'm a teacher, like I'm a professor, this is the thing. But I think that so, I mean, it's not like you're doing this, it's interesting to think, I feel like the way I think of graphic design, sometimes I'm just like so happy I have this skill. Yeah, like I'm like a skilled worker. Because it makes me feel like I get a certain, like, I don't know, you're like, yeah, okay, I know how to do this thing. And I don't know, Tuan, if you've ever...
I mean, I connect the activity of being a teacher to like being an organizer. About one of the things I note to myself is always like, when you're having these conversations, like meeting people where they're at, like, where are they? And so what kind of conversation can you have with them? It's the same thing I do with students, like trying to figure out where they're at so I can have that conversation to like bring them over to something, basically. Design wise, the only thing I say that I do take notes, and I, try to like plan like contingencies, like what conversations I might be having. Like I take notes on all the canvases about like when, talking about people, like, why are they voting for Warren? And so I have like lists of things, and I kind of work on that stuff. That dimension is designerly, I guess. But yeah, I think I connected more to the teaching side.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that canvassing is pedagogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Jimmy, we should move on to talk specifically about the amazing projects that these folks are doing. Danielle, we want to hear about your new book, The Detroit Printing Co-op, which charts the history of Lorraine and Freddie Perlman's exploration of what you call in your subtitle, the politics of the joy of printing. Andrew Blauvelt described the book as, quote, offering a refreshing example of graphic design as it was practiced in the most alternative of ways, not only outside of the mainstream design profession, but also against the prevailing capitalist economy premised on private ownership. And then he goes on effusively to note that the Perlman's unexpected visually inventive designs for politically salient works offer a much needed example of how self-publishing and DIY printing, that of course are so in vogue today, can be used not just to make something, but also to say something. Can you tell us about this new book and how you came to the project, and whatever else you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I have one copy here. It's been like it was printed overseas and it's been in transit for a long time. But I got some advanced copies. So, but it should be here like any day. The project. I began that project because I was teaching history of graphic design here in Detroit and looking for examples of Detroit graphic designers. I knew Ed Bella, of course, and Lorraine Wild is originally from here, and there's like the Cranbrook kind of tradition, but like I was kind of keeping an eye out for other practices or other designers, and I came across this. I didn't really come across it, but a friend of mine did an exhibition of work that was published by this group called Black and Red, which is sort of like a publisher of ultra-left books, and that's Freddie and Lorraine Perlman. And at the exhibition, I was like really struck by the layouts of some of the books. I'm gonna see if I can find an example, but like just for an example was like this is a spread from one of the books, and they're like these political texts. I don't know if you can see that. But there are these political texts, but I could see like somebody's thinking about design here, and it turns out like Freddie Perlman was entirely kind of self-taught with design. So like basically the story is that in 1970 they moved to Detroit and opened a print co-op. So they got access to an offset printer, and with a group of friends, kind of rented a space, borrowed money, and then started printing their own books and distributing their own books. And they said that the printer was not owned by anyone. They considered it social property. So anyone who wanted to use the space and like maintain the space was able to come print. They had like monthly rent expenses, but it was pretty low. So if you just kind of came in and like helped print some of the like paying projects, you could print there. And some of the paying projects were things like the journal for the SDS, the Students for Democratic Society, which is like a Radical America. And then they printed like the 37th edition of the IWW Little Red Songbook. That was like one of their big paid projects, which is like that book has been printed, I don't know how many millions of times. And then one of the most famous things that was printed there, not a paying project, but something Black and Red did themselves, was the first English translation of Society of the Spectacle from Guy Debord. And so I like kind of found out about some of this stuff, and I was just like, like a lot of things in Detroit, it's a history or a story that hadn't really been widely told, people didn't know it actually. So, and even, and Lorraine Perlman is still here. She still publishes books. She's kept a lot of the books in print. Freddie died in '85, but so I ended up just meeting with her and working with her and decided to like kind of get all of the track all the publications I could find that were printed there, and to try to make almost like a catalog raisonné where and so some of these things were printed by, this was the bug that they had. If you can, I don't know if it's showing up in reverse. Maybe
no. Yeah,
no,
that's
you're showing up in.
That's amazing.
So it says, abolish the wage system, abolish the state, all power to the workers. And they were members of the IWW. So they, so I used that to try to find like anything that was printed at the co-op would have had that on it, because Black and Red was Freddie and Lorraine, but it was like lots of people that were coming through there. So the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, which was this sort of like militant, like Marxist group within the UAW that was trying to like, they were trying to radicalize Black auto workers in this like early 70s, late 60s. So they printed a couple of books at their co-op. And then some high school students, like disaffected high school students, printed some newspapers there. There's like a whole range of people, and it just tells an interesting history of Detroit. So, and then yeah, so that's so then through that act, I was like working on that from. I did an exhibition of this in 2016, and we had a panel discussion, like with contemporary political printers in Detroit, like toward the end of the exhibition, and that was like 3 days before Trump's election. And one of the people on the panel was this guy, Roger Robinson, who has a print shop now that called Red Door Digital, that was the headquarters of the Bernie, Michigan campaign in 2016, which, Michigan went for Bernie. And so Roger then recruited me and my friend Kiko to DSA. So that's how we ended up. It was like I was doing all this historical stuff, and you feel like the energy when you're reading this. You're like, wow, they printed this like in September of 68, and October of 68 and November of 68, and you see all these things coming out like in quick succession, and I'd be like, what am I doing? I'm just sitting here in the archives. But so it kind of it went from that to translate into like current moments. Like through this sort of work, I kind of feel like it made me feel like urgency about trying to get engaged.
And so in looking at and as a historian myself, I'm always interested in the ways in which studying history kind of informs the present. Do you see in the radicalism of the co-op time a model for contemporary practice?
Yeah, like they're definitely more like anarchist leaning. So I feel like, I don't think I distinguished that much. I'm also interested in anarchism. Like I did this project on the dispossessed Ursula K. Le Guin book and everything, which is sort of anarchist. But like, I think when I got down to practical organizing, I personally became more like, I feel like this sort of like deep organizing of like socialist makes more sense for me. So I feel like they were kind of, but there's like room for everything, but I feel like they were really like kind of they weren't like part of like a huge movement. They were kind of like doing their thing. It was more like movements were passing through the space in a way. But I do see a model, because one thing I've been thinking about lately is actually trying to figure out how to join the IDW as a co-op with other screen printers and printers in Detroit, because that guy, Roger Robinson, who's the local printer, he's a union printer. So he prints everything for us for DSA, like offset. But we have also been making signs, like for the UAW strike, we printed some signs that were kind of like inserted into the strike. And they were printed by our friends for free who have like a kind of community screen print shop, but they're not union. They're just like a co-op, but they don't have a bug. So in the context of these union things, like people want the bug. So I was like, maybe we should all of us who are designers working in DSA or similar spaces, maybe we should just like all join IWW, like they did. But then
what does that entail, Danielle?
Sorry?
When you say join the IWW, like what does that entail? Is that a difficult thing to achieve? Are there certain criteria that you have to fulfill?
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I started looking into it. I mean, I'm not like a total expert. I know the IWW chapter in Detroit is pretty small, so it's not difficult. You can't be a boss of anybody. There's rules, like you can't be the boss, and you also can't be like elected in a political party. So you can't be elected to like the Democratic or Green or Republican Party. So I could join. But the thing is, I'm already in the union. I'm in the AFT, the teachers union. So the reason I would want to join is basically to try to get a bug. So I'd have to like kind of form a co-op. And if you want to join as a co-op, every member has to also join IWW in order to kind of get the bug and be a part of the printers and graphics, like IU 450 or whatever, the part of the IWW that does that work. And so it's something like $20 a month. So it's not insignificant amount of money. So I don't know. I'm not sure, but I've been like grappling with this thing of like, I don't know. Just this thing of like what labor gets marked as being union or. I can go on and on about union bugs. And
I guess that's when you're talking about that bug, it's that mark that you can put on all the printed material that signifies that it is union labor. Is that correct?
Yeah, like I have an example from this was I didn't design this, but this is for some friends who are running for office, and you see it has that bug.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like something that Roger Red Door printed. And that's what like all political campaigns, you know, hire union labor, and then, you know, so it's something, it's an important like marker of whether you're hiring union.
It's really interesting to think about the tensions with respect to labor, the tensions between the designer and the printer.
Yeah.
And because that division, I mean, I suppose we could say we can blame it all on the Renaissance, you know, but that division, I think, is a really, really interesting one in terms of how you think about organizing in the 21st century.
Yeah, and that's where I got like frustrated, because for the UAW, you know, the General Motors strike, we made these signs. They said like everyone tier 1, because they were to support some of the DSA members who were in UAW, who were trying to push UAW to not to hold strong on the tier system, like try to like end the tier system, which is really kind of damaging the union. So they weren't like official UAW signs, obviously, but kind of like bringing them. And they were printed, like I said, like volunteer printed by other activists. But somebody who had been in the ITU in Detroit during the newspaper strikes was kind of like, hey, I saw these signs and like this isn't right. Like that they say labor donated, and that's a slap in the face. And I was like, you know what? I was so frustrated because I'm like, you know, nobody. It's always at the moment of printing that suddenly has to be union. But I'm like, what about my labor? I mean, I'm in a union, but I'm like, what about the fact that there's like all this other labor that goes into it? There's the graphic design, there's the paper, and also like we all give what we can. Like we show up for 2 hours on the picket line, or we screen print for 2 hours in our studio, and. You know, and I was just like, I mean, it's too much to try to explain in a Facebook post response to this person, but I was annoyed because I was like, we all, you know, because I was like, yeah, they should join. Okay, they could join IWW, I guess, but then they're paying, you know, each of them have to join, and then they're paying $40 a month in order to print for free. So, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's such an important issue, and I think that all corners of design are actually attempting to deal with this right now. I mean, in architecture, the architects lobby is trying to expose, right, the invisibility of so much of the labor that goes into the production of, I mean, buildings in particular, but of any aspect of design.
I mean, I think it's, and I mean, just to be clear, I do think it's important to unionize, you know, like, but I think it's also like you have to think about which union you're joining, because if you're joining something like IWW, which is not that strong, or, you know, like, it's like, of course it would strengthen it if more people joined it. It's not that they can necessarily protect you or whatever. So it's also like, but that's why like I'm interested in. I saw that evening class, or like there was this recently that article in Ion Design that was about like how evening class is like they're kind of in London, they're starting to organize with the same union that's been trying to organize janitors and Uber drivers, and I thought that seems like a good step, you know, and it would be nice to see something like that happen in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Or try to make that happen.
So I want to get back to both of your projects, but I want to have Tuan quickly talk about his current project, Collar Criminals. Tuan, can you? I mean, it's a very curious project. I think the way that you've gone about it is really interesting to me, and it's hard to confront. I think people get a little confused when they look at it because it is kind of presented under the guise of capitalism. So can you tell us, our viewers, can you describe the project and kind of give us a premise of it? And I believe our producers will have images of it, and they're going to put it over your face.
Okay. I mean, the project started back in, I think, 2018. Like, if you look at the Instagram posts, and it was basically, it's a low stakes project for me in terms of like, I needed just to make something. Like, I didn't have any like client work or other big projects, and so I needed to make something, and so I do low stakes things like basically. I think it launched in October, so I was actually trying to hijack Inktober. Like if you look at the hashtags that are used in the posts, I'm just basically like putting my work into that flow. And so the first batch that was done last year was just about the 2008 financial crisis, all the people who did not go to jail. I was basically calling them out, showing how much money they kind of cost the world and how much jail time they got, which is 0 years, and just kind of interlacing them between people who did go to jail in the past. Like we did, like the SNL crisis back in the 80s, we sent people to jail, but not this time. And so then that basically evolved to a point where it's like I was making that, then I wanted to buy ad space, and I thought I could just put ad space into the, buy ads, put them into people's feeds. But it turns out Instagram requires you to have a product, like literally like sell something physically. It's like, okay, I need to brainstorm about this. And so I just basically put things on t-shirts, basically. Like I made a Facebook store, that was a required thing, and put it on a product. So like a print on demand thing. And then yeah, I got to buy ad space, and I just do something quick, like I try to make 30 posts in October. I tied in with Inktober, and yeah, it's pretty, I don't know, it's straightforward.
Well, and the current project is a critique of the professional managerial class, the quote unquote professional managerial class.
Yes.
And all of these posters that you're making, you've kind of made them all into products. Like there's either on a t-shirt, on a poster, or in a frame.
Yes.
And they're all kind of print on demand things.
Yes.
And you price them in a certain way, and you're marketing them as if they're quote unquote real products. Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
I mean, they are real products. If you want to order some, which some people have, comrades have, and there's a discount for comrades. Otherwise, they were priced. The shirts were priced to look, like fancy, like $50 fashionable, I don't know, capitalist t-shirts, like a capitalist would own it, basically. And then the professional managerial class is about, the class that isn't like involved in anything right now, except for helping out the wealthy elite. And so they can afford a very nicely framed poster, and so, that's priced like in the hundreds of dollars. And so yeah, I had to keep true, like keep the voice true. Like I couldn't make things cheap. Like that wouldn't be right.
That wouldn't be right for the professional managerial class.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was a term that, kind of in the middle of the 20th century emerges, if we think of like William White's Organization Man, et cetera. And I wonder how many people that we would identify as being in the professional managerial class use that term themselves these days and kind of see that as part of their identity.
Does that happen?
That term I pulled from Barbara Ehrenreich.
Ehrenreich, yeah.
Ehrenreich, yeah. And I think that she did that research back in the 60s, 70s, like that term came up. Mm-hmm. And so, nowadays, I'm not sure how far people like extend that.
I wanted to just interject that one of the books that Freddie Perlman wrote was about this guy C. Wright Mills, who's a sociologist who wrote White Collar, this book. But I thought I'll show. It's kind of small, but there's a picture from that where it's like, Tuan, you might like it.
Yeah.
All these pictures of people of like, I don't know if you can see, they're like on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
There's the professional managerial class.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the name of the Instagram account was Collar Criminals, that I just took the white out.
Right.
So it's like, and if you look at the avatar, I was using Harvey Keitel, Mr. White from Reservoir Dogs, and then I rotated to Snow White, like a version of Snow White. And so you could make the connection and say white collar criminals. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also really good though, because don't the police refer to collaring criminals as when they grab one, right? It's X number of collars. Well, we wouldn't expect it to be anything better than
than that. Like when I look at this project one, there's like an element of like things that remind me of work that was done in like the 80s and 90s with people like doing culture jamming, like, and when Adbusters first came out, and like people like the Yes Men. It seems like a rather effective tool. And I wonder, like, can either you or Danielle, like, I have a sense that it's coming back into vogue. Like, people are becoming interested in culture jamming again in a way that we haven't seen recently, to me, or maybe I'm just not paying attention enough. What do you guys think about that as a technique?
I mean, I go back to like, okay, so you make the thing. I think one of the earlier questions by you asked about, are you looking to like, what is it? Bring down capitalism. I think
are you looking to bring it down?
And it's like, yes, can it be done through like a little Instagram post? And it's like, no, probably not. I hope that it like puts like a meme into their mind, and then I hope they question that. But the thing is, I don't know where it goes. That's why it's like I go back to the DSA stuff. When you're actually talking to people, you can actually have the conversation about like the contradictions, basically, about like, so, you know, you like this and this, but this and this and this happened. Are you all right with that? Like, does it you know, conflict with your values? And it's like, and so you can actually track the conversation and know like where is it going, like where are they heading towards. And so when I put stuff on like Instagram, you kind of don't know, like, you know, they're clicking on it, but like their reaction to it and stuff, I have no idea how it plays out.
Yeah, but if we accept that Facebook and Instagram have come pretty damn close to toppling democracy, I don't see why we should think that a little Instagram post is not in fact having a tremendous impact, particularly if the project continues.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think also I've had like some, I don't know about with the culture jamming thing. I sort of see like maybe the comeback coming through memes, or, you know, where it's like more like people doing it themselves, and you see these sort of, I mean, I feel like what's, you know, it's always like nice when you see those memes and it's like the same image and it's a different text and people keep, you know, and then like it gets, things just keep getting recycled and like translated or like, but I think that like with respect to using like Facebook, like I have more experience using doing ads with Facebook, like for political campaigns, and that's been kind of like interesting because like I saw like, I mean, because I totally agree, Facebook had such a huge impact on the last election. I mean, and Twitter and everything, but I think the Facebook ads are pretty intense, and like we realized we just were running these candidates for office, and we realized that we were doing the Facebook ads wrong before, because like, well, first of all, you cannot. I think if Tuan is putting an ad on there, maybe as yourself, or like you have this account, maybe it's as a business, like you can put it up, but our chapter can't make Facebook ads until we like register with the Facebook authority. It used to be that like I personally myself could register and I'd get a letter and I would verify that I'm not a Russian operative and I can post political content for this page. But now the page has to be verified. And so like we went through this process for these political campaigns, for these candidates, verifying their page. And then we realized that like someone who does campaign work was like, the way you target people is you get these lists from Voter Action Network, VAN, and I mean, it's very creepy, but you like upload the names of like likely voters and then you target those people. Because we were like targeting people geographically. Like we'd be like, okay, everybody within 20 miles of the Detroit, you know, like should try to do this thing. But we were like, I don't know who we're really reaching. It seemed like it wasn't working. And they were like, no, the way that like Trump and all of them do it is like they're uploading voter data.
That's very interesting.
So that's why you get the feed that's like targeted specifically.
Yeah. Van is the thing that we use to know what doors to knock on.
No, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, so you can upload those names and then Facebook can like search those people. So you could do your targeted. I mean, I think what you're doing, it doesn't, it's a different thing because it's not like you need specific people to be like seeing your, I mean, you could do, I don't know, that would be super creepy.
The next step of activism, right, is that using the same tools that commercial enterprises are using on us.
Yeah.
The cookies of activism. That there's a project.
Yeah.
So you guys are both educators, and Tuan, you've already mentioned this a little bit, but how does you've mentioned how your role as an educator informs your organizing and canvassing. How does the political enter into your classrooms?
I mean, like in the past, like I've been recently radicalized. So in the past, I try to stay neutral in terms, if there's such thing as neutrality, where I don't, my projects usually aren't like commercial projects. It's like I don't do a logo project. I do a symbol project. So I kind of like defang things. But yeah, recently, so I got it back. So I was recently, so this summer basically, I got into DSA and reading more about socialists and stuff. So I've been trying to figure out ways to actually bring it into the projects, like literally like bring it in. And so that's work in progress, like right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think also like Tuan, I have mixed, I try to like be kind of neutral, but it's hard. And I think that like literally the student asked me after class, like after the third history of graphic design class, a student asked me if I was a communist, and I was, what did I say in class today? but with history, it's like I really like teaching history because you're providing content, but I just try to talk about the politics and the labor, like I'm like, how did they make things and how does that affect, what were the working conditions that we think, and so I think it was actually after I talked about William Morris, so it's like not even like crazy, but he was a socialist, but then that I feel like because the students are going into debt to be in my classroom and because I am involved in hiring adjuncts who are getting paid like nothing, I feel like the political is there, like it's in the room, and I think that it's always this kind of like thing about providing a space for them, like a kind of safe space for the students where they don't have to, I don't want it to be like overly charged politically or something. Like I want all of them to feel like comfortable there, whatever their political background is. But I also kind of want to have cues so they kind of know, like they can talk to me about socialism if they want to. But so like just this year, but I think I actually joined DSA like, it's been like 2 years. So I've been like more, it's, I'm kind of in deep now. And I think that like, at first I tried to like really keep these worlds separate, but this year I actually started the YDSA chapter at Wayne State. So, I mean, I didn't start it, but I'm the faculty advisor. Mm-hmm. We finally had enough students coming to meetings that we were like, let's just get this together. So and we have the AIGA chapter. So I'm like, and I feel like this is actually pretty indicative of the like worlds I feel like I'm trying to straddle, because I'm like, I need to help them get jobs. The ones, I need to help them have the skill set that they are competitive to go work at an ad agency or wherever and just do whatever I need to do to prepare them with their, portfolios and all the professional questions they have. But also, I need to radicalize them. and so I have like my graphic design students, but then most of the YDSA students, they're just from the university, and that's actually been amazing because I'm meeting normally I only know graphic design students, but through that I'm meeting students from like across the university, and then I'm trying to get a handful of graphic designers over there. We need people to make posters, and I'm like, you guys, you know, the student who asked me if I'm a communist, I was like, maybe you'd like to come to this meeting. But I feel like, I kind of feel like it's like this awkward, it's like I know in some classes, like in the humanities, they're just like full-on Marxists in the classroom, you know, and they're just reading the Communist Manifesto. And I feel like with graphic design, it's like, I don't know, it's always a question about like how to, you know, I've had Trump voters in my class before, and you know, you just want to be like, okay, we're all humans, like, let's,
yeah.
I'm not gonna, you know, I still care about you as a student, you know.
I want to, I don't know, Tuan is, I think he's getting into deeper territory here in the spring.
Oh, yeah.
I want to read to you guys the course title of a course that Tuan is teaching for us in the spring. The course title is Anti-Imperial, Post-Colonial, Non-Commercial Design Commerce. So I think we've crossed the threshold.
What's the last word? Is it commerce?
Commerce, yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that, Tuan, before we wrap up this segment?
I mean, post-colonial, that's in the atmosphere right now in design stuff. And so, and then I crossed paths with I guess this Philippine collaborative, hardworking, good-looking, and got their book about post-colonial, like Philippine design. And so, yeah, I was interested in trying to like translate that to like an American context about if there is such thing as that. And so then, you know, all that Instagram project that I was working on, that's the commerce part. Like it's a store, but not a store. And so I was just, I'm interested in seeing if there's like a visual language that isn't so like entrenched or from like a Eurocentric history, basically. And I have no idea what that will look like or how that would go. I have ideas about just like the class will like, I think we're going to listen to podcasts and then do calligraphy like at the beginning. And then we'll somehow process that through into like letter form. And then something, I don't know. It's work in progress. I'm still trying to figure that out.
I hope they end up radicalized.
Well, I was going to ask, I guess registration has just started, so we probably don't know how many students you'll eventually have. Do I dare ask the dreaded tenure question? I mean, does the degree to which the political seeps into your work at the university, historically, this is always an issue.
I mean, I'm not a good person to ask that question to you. I'm out of the tenure. I'm in the tenure process, but I'm not in it in the sense that this school does not have a traditional 7-year up and out structure. Okay. And so even though there is tenure, you can get tenure, but you just apply when you feel like it. And then, so.
Yeah. Comrade Phan is not feeling like it right now.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, that in itself, I mean, I know there are all kinds of complicated politics related to tenure, but the idea that there's not a ticking clock seems to me to be a certain kind of progress.
Yes, for sure. I think, oh my gosh, we're like out of time with Danielle and Tuan Phan. Danielle and Tuan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a great discussion.
It's good to see you, Antoine.
Yes, it's good to see you again. I look forward to reading your book. And for everyone out there, if you want to follow Tuan's work, it's at Collar Criminals on Instagram. And you can pre-order Danielle's book right now at Inventory Press, and it ships hopefully in November.
Hopefully this week,
Hopefully this week. Yes.
Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, and now we are joined by Arzu, Ozkal, and Tricia Treacy, who are currently in residence at the ICA in Portland, Maine, as part of the Futurespective. They are practitioners of film, video, photography, printmaking, and performance. Ozkal works at the intersections between design activism and social design, looking for forms of creative and critical outcomes through social participation that emphasize issues like women's participation in the public sphere, in public space. Tricia has a creative practice that is actively collaborative and is often a hybrid of two mediums. She prioritizes text-based work, artist books, printing, and publishing. Arzu is based in San Diego. Tricia is based in North Carolina. They first met in 2015 during Design Inquiry's No-Quo gathering on Vinyl Haven in Maine.
And since then, Ozkal and Treacy have worked together on-site and off-site in a collaboration they call Situated Between. This term defines their process and articulates a quasi-manifesto situated between a spontaneous point of departure without a fixed point in the future. It's a protocol, or no protocol, that involves constant tactic developing to effectively and collectively seek inspiration in each other, in other humans, and in non-humans to activate new intersections and allow new forms of engagement. Arzu and Tricia, welcome to Universal Lunch.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Can you guys hear us fine?
Yes.
There's a lot going on here right now.
Exciting. We want to hear all about what's going on there right now.
We have a sourdough bread making workshop happening and some video installations with some sounds. Yeah.
And what are you doing during your residency?
Well, we both arrived on Sunday night. Got to prompt our 34 students in graphic design, and we had them work on the project in the same way that we have done with collaborators. And so this morning they returned back after 3 days of making and investigating and playing, and they had a show and tell, and we saw the results, which are fantastic. And now they've scrambled off to make some sort of documentation of all the evidence that is going to be put into our next book, which we are currently working on while we're here this week. So it's been a whirlwind in 4 days.
So can you tell us about briefly your current practices, but I want to hear more about the nature of this collaborative project and then how it relates to the stuff that you're doing with the students this week.
So should we do individual?
Sure.
I think what connects us is that we both, our individual practices are both collaborative. So I've been researching women's networks for since 2006 or 2007. I started analyzing this tradition back in Turkey, women's only gatherings. It's usually for women who don't work, and it's a channel for them to get together and form this affinity group that support each other. And they even have this informal microeconomy that they collect gold coins, so that it generates them an income that they don't have to report to authorities or even their husband.
Ooh, I like
really
that.
Fascinated. Yeah, I was fascinated with this informal network, and I started looking into that a little bit more, and I got really fascinated about working with other people and creating that support group for myself. I have a collective called Home Affairs that we try to do projects together. And then with Tricia, I met Tricia during a design inquiry meeting in 2015, NOCO. And, we really connected there. And, all the with the background, similar work we do, similar interests we have. We are both mothers. We both have full-time jobs in academia, so the struggle that it brings. And we just continued our conversation, and we started, it was very natural that we started collaborating.
So my background is in printing, publishing, language. I have a creative writing degree. I've been teaching design, and I've been doing a lot of collaborative projects with different people. I think it started in the beginning with some sort of like a print editioning collaboration where I do work alongside other people, not as collaborative as my practice has evolved over time as I mix it up and collaborate with people outside my discipline. So when I met Arzu, we really connected, and we just started this mail art project that we did for 3 years. And she came to visit me in Rome, and we decided to share what we had been doing independently, privately, just amongst ourselves, and we never made anything to share. And we thought, okay, this is a good time to expose what we've been doing. So
and even the work that we were sending to each other, it wasn't supposed to be work or a project. It was like a goofy note, like
a distraction.
Here, or you can do this, like really motivate and encourage the other person. And we would receive things in the mail. We wouldn't wait for them. We didn't have a deadline or anything. All of a sudden, you receive something in the mail, and you go to your studio and generate a response to it because it just stops you. It's very playful. And
I think we would instigate each other to push beyond what we would even expect ourselves to do. Arzu sent me this box. It was like a shirt box. And I was like, what the heck is in this box? So I opened the box, and inside the box is a printed piece of paper from a book with wire and stickers and highlights. And then I had to take the box, deconstruct the box, and then make something else and then send it back. And so then I was like, well, she made a box, so I have to work with a weird material too. So then I started burning wax with an iron and working outside of my comfort zone because we just instigate each other to push outward. And so then eventually what we were doing to each other, we started to invite others to join in that practice and push beyond.
And have those people that you've invited, have they been women or men or non-binary folk, or has it not mattered?
Everything in between.
It seems like a lot of your collaborative process sounds to me like an ongoing conversation that you're having with each other. Is that a similar thing that you've asked the students to do this week? And how have they taken on to this collaborative process in the way that you do it, like this conversational component?
When we assigned the project, we read them the prompts, and we said, okay, you like in collaboration groups, which could be 2-person group, or it could be a whole, you can come together as 35 people and do it if you want to. So they organically made their groups. But then what we told them, I think, helped them see it in a different point of, or different perspective. We said, this is not a deadline. This is not another project for you guys to or add stress to your lives. We want you to really feel the joy of making something together. And
think of it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to do something you haven't done before in a new way,
and it's
with no expectations.
We're not trying to prove ourselves we're the best designers or best students or anything like that. Just go out there and try playing together, and let's see what's going to happen. And most of the results were to show that, actually. They really enjoyed making, creating responses, which I think if they continue, may end up in a really interesting end result.
And how has this work begun to inform your own other work? I mean, you talked about it as the sort of exchange that you began, that no deadline, it was this other thing, but does it then begin to make its way back into your own thinking about other projects?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Especially teaching, I have to say, because as I said, our practices were already responding to this collaborative with different groups, with different people. You've been collaborating with other collectives, and I've been too. But I try to bring this into my teaching now and try to create groups of, instead of assigning individual projects to my students and go do this, go do that, I try to encourage them to think more collectively and even create a project. They create the project and they propose the project to me. So it's more of a dialogue. It's not me as the authority, as the teacher, going classroom and like, do this, do that.
Yeah, for me, everything I do is fluid. I mean, I feel like I could be teaching right now. I could be on this call. I could be having a conversation. I don't really separate things in my life. It's all one big jarbled insanity. I don't know. I don't see it through lenses. It's all encompassing who I am, probably.
So then the question is it that everything is a project or that you're always in your practice?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Yeah.
I agree.
And,
yes.
As you both are educators, how do your students confront that ambiguity, that fluidity, that you're like, as you're teaching, you're in your practice, as you're not teaching, you're in your practice. How do they confront that? Because to me, that sounds so elegant and beautiful and wonderful, and I want to subscribe to it, obviously. But how does an 18 to 21-year-old confront this?
You probably would have to ask them. However,
yeah. Or how do you perceive that they're confronting it?
I think some students hate it, but learn to love it. And I think some students are very uncomfortable with it. But I think that they learn from it. And if they are experiencing that opportunity as an opportunity, I think they can take something away, whether they enjoyed it or not. It's not for everybody. I think that when I encourage them to work together and be more open and let outside things come inside, I think it's always a win-win. So they may not realize it when there are students, but eventually, at some point, everybody realizes it was okay.
I know that my students don't like it. They could be watching it.
Yeah, they're probably all sending messages right now. It's awful.
It's difficult. Students do not like ambiguity. Students like deadlines. Students like step-by-step instructions. And if there's in between that doesn't tell them to do a leukotype at this time of the day, it freaks them out. But it's okay.
It's important for me as an educator to allow them to develop their voice. And if I am telling them what to do, they are not developing a creative voice. So for me, I think it's really important that things are open for them to fill in the holes and define the voice.
But Arzu, when you say that you're like, I know they don't like it. How do you, as an educator, how do you aid them in understanding, negotiating it, and maybe eventually coming to like it? I think I'm looking to hear a strategy or a tactic here that you might employ.
Sure. What I've started doing is introducing it gradually. Like the first project I assign is more structured and I tell them step by step what I'm expecting. And the second one is a little bit more ambiguous and they start asking me what do you expect for tomorrow? I'm like, everything, always everything. Right. And the third project, the final project, I just tell them, okay, you guys are going to create your own contracts and you will tell me what you want to deliver when. And that's what you're responsible for. I'm not going to ask. And the project, they create the project, they write the goals, I have my learning outcomes and everything, but it's up to them how they will get together and what to deliver. So I think by the time I assign the third project, they understand what I'm expecting and they start enjoying that a little bit maybe.
And this happens over. Oh, go ahead, Gabrielle. Sorry.
Well, it occurs to me that it's perhaps pedagogically, it's about encouraging them to understand that it's not just a way of producing this project for this class, that in fact what you're doing is teaching them how to be a designer, that everything is not always project directed, etc. And you can imagine that there's probably an aha moment for each of them.
Sometimes I see it by the end of the semester, but sometimes they come back a couple years later and they tell me that they had the aha moment later on. Yeah.
Always it's years later.
Right.
Always it's after they've written that real shitty student evaluation about you.
Exactly.
True, but if you read those student evaluations carefully, there's usually some glimmer of the grasping in it, because even in their bitching and moaning, if they took the time to bitch and moan, it's probably because they were already thinking through what they were learning, what they were grasping.
Right, yeah.
Good point.
One can hope. One is hoping.
So does your residency feel like teaching? Because you're meeting with students, or is it different? I know you've already addressed the question that you're not necessarily studying things, but sometimes it's exhausting to leave one group of students and then come and encounter another group of students.
I didn't think it's teaching. It's more like collaborating with a new group of people, because we didn't have to tell them what to do.
And they're very hands-off. We told them we're here to help them, and not many took us up on that. There's been just working independently, which surprised me. I was very surprised that they just went for it.
Right. Which gave us time to develop our own project and work on the publication.
So we're working on design for our final publication for the series, and we've had time each day to work on that, which has been great.
Oh wow! So that you're actually moving forward one of your own projects while you are in residence. And just out of curiosity, have you been doing that in that back gallery at the ICA, that collaborative work? Oh, so you can also, it's sort of like come to the ICA and see designers at work.
Exactly.
I think that's the point of the designer in residency. Yeah, so that people can come ask questions if they want to, but we're observing that a lot of people are shy. They just pass by the artists and pretend we're not here.
Okay, so I want to know, because obviously I am a huge fan of you both, and I love the work that you're doing. I want to know a little bit more of what is influencing that work, as in, AKA, what are you reading these days? What are you reading or paying attention to? What kinds of things are you consuming, whether that's text or images or both? What's on your radar? Or food or Netflix, I don't know.
Eating this really good Colombian food that we found. And you want to answer first?
We're consuming a lot of coffee to keep us fueled. I feel like, so this project that we're working on, we put a call out and we asked certain people for contributions. And we're at a moment now in the work where the contributions are coming back and we're processing. We have, essays and visuals and video and books. We have a lot of different pieces to kind of navigate and process and culminate into this publication. So I feel like the work that we've gotten back from people is really what we're kind of sifting through at the moment, personally. I mean, for me anyhow, I feel like we're trying to resolve this publication and it's not quite there yet. So we're going back into that work, I think.
Right. And I think mostly because I have graduate students, so I do readings with them. Recently, I'm revisiting Gattari's Soft Subversion, which is very related to the, what Danielle was talking, or her book is about micro-publishing, micro-cinema, micro-politics, creating these underground spaces for people to create things outside the capitalist hegemony, right? Which is directly related to what we are doing. Like, we are creating this publication. We have liberty to do whatever we want, and I think it's really wonderful. We create these networks, we invite people to come participate, and there's total trust in between us. It's not about money, it's not about anything else. It's really the joy of making together. So that's something I've been reading and thinking a lot lately. I'm trying to make I have a book project on the side about mail art. But I came across with this person I teach at San Diego State. She created this mail art project back in the 70s. There's a series of 5 zines that she put out, titled Cabaret Catwalk. So I'm trying to create a book around that publication and try to contextualize it, like why it was so important back then and why it's still so important to create these publications that are not necessarily come out of big publishing, big presses, but more do-it-yourself, small.
Tricia, can you tell us a little bit about like these contributions that you're combing through?
Sure. So we have these, the first thing that comes to my head is the very visual marks, drawings that we got from Eric Brandt. Gave us these amazing, really high contrast letter forms with really unusual names. I can read you a little caption. Captions are what have been captivating to me. So we have, these are just some of our little models here that we're working on. And they're these beautiful big letter forms, and you can see the 3 at the bottom. And the caption is, "These 3 friends listen to one another." And they're just poetic and beautiful, and I'm trying to figure out what they are, and I'm not quite there yet, but I like where it takes me when I read them. And they're probably going to weave throughout the book. We haven't quite figured out the sequence yet, but we're getting closer. This is also really good. Maybe you could read some of this text. This text is amazing. This is this wonderful book that was sent to us, and it reads 2 ways. You've read the original text, haven't you?
I did, yeah. It's based on a poetry poem by Carl Sandburg.
It's all printed on acetate, and then the book can be read 2 ways. There's a narrative on the back. And so this is quite a challenge to figure out how to translate parts of this into another publication.
That actually brings up a question I was thinking about as you were talking, Tricia, which was, as you are both going through this work that you invited people to submit, are you seeing yourselves wearing multiple hats as editors, curators, designers? And how does that have an impact on, let's say, your critical eye?
It's challenging. I mean, I think that's why we've done 3 of these, because each one we are confronted with different content, and it's quite challenging to figure out how to navigate and pull it together and present it to somebody else, because all the content is interesting on its own. And then what happens when you start to weave these narratives together? And we can't include everything, so we have to be selective, and we have to curate and craft that narrative in the new book. It's challenging, but it's also really fascinating and wonderful. So it's
another challenging thing is that we want people to understand when we receive the work, we're not just going to include it as is, because it's not about representing it, verbatim, but it's a collaboration. We also process it in different ways.
Yeah, we're thinking about how the work connects to each other. I mean, I look at the drawings of Eric Brandt, and then Ian sent us these amazing drawings, and they look like they could have happened sitting at the same table together, but they don't even know that they're going to be together in this publication. And then My friend in Amsterdam wrote this piece and she hasn't shared with anybody, and she tracked all the time in between when she was texting with somebody, having this relationship with someone through WhatsApp. And so she tracked for 14 days all the time that she spent in each of these text messages. And it's about movement of the fingers on the phone in relationship to this private conversation relationship she's having with somebody. And I don't think she ever planned to put this out there, but when she read our prompt, she thought about how her fingers move on her phone when she's communicating. And it's just like this amazing thing that I hadn't thought about myself when I'm on my phone, that my body is becoming part of this conversation. So it's just really wonderful to kind of sift through. And Arzu and I have never done a book where normally we're doing all this remotely. We haven't had the opportunity to be next to each other and talking and having these conversations. Usually we're working on a folder. And I think one of the ways that we work, which is fascinating, and when I tell people this, they kind of can't believe it, where she works on a folder, on a file, and she'll upload it and send me a message. I sent the new file, and then I go in there and I can add, I can delete, I can erase, I can start over, and we give complete freedom to each other, and there's no judgment. And I get it back and I go, wow, all that stuff I did is gone, but look what's here, and everything evolves. And we have this amazing trust that I think a lot of people are not capable of doing. So, but we're doing that and being here.
What's the versioning control that's actually happening behind the scenes? Are you each keeping copies, or you're really just, it's a one-off file that keeps getting worked on?
We have the versions. I've never gone back to a previous version. Have you? Yeah. Never. It's always the current version is the one that moves forward. Mm-hmm. And there's never been a conversation of why did you do that or where did that go? It's like, okay, this is where we are. Let's keep going. We're on a road and we keep going.
Where does that trust come from, and how do you build it?
I don't know. I've tried to do this with other people and it's not possible.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's different? What's different with Arzu?
I don't know. I think there's just a trust that can't be defined, or a respect, or a combination of both. Not that I don't respect other people, but maybe they don't respect me, or maybe they just worry there's a control. I don't know. I can't articulate why, but I'm just so happy we have this and we can do it.
And I maybe it was something that we decided in the beginning that we were just letting it go. I normally to control everything, and I'm sure you
maybe this is something we've been wanting to do with other people, but that other person wasn't willing, and we're both willing. Maybe that's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it's also perhaps that you met in a certain context at perhaps certain moments of your life where you're ready to have that kind of relationship with a collaborator. I think one shouldn't discount what you're bringing to it at a particular moment in time. I think it's, not to sound too promotional here, but I think one of the values of design inquiry is that you've already stepped into this realm that is not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have one last thing to ask about your publication. What happens to it when you're done? How does it travel in the world, and what kind of space do you envision for it?
Well, we're having a launch in New York. We've had, after each one, we've had somewhat of an event. We've done book fairs. Since this is our final one, we wanted to do a reading performance launch. So we're doing one at Print at Matter in New York in January.
Right.
And we'll have all three. And I think they've made their way around. The first one isn't now out of print. They're going into collections. They're reasonably priced so that people can buy them. And they're kind of traveling all over, which is great.
What's your edition?
100, I think. I hope. We haven't started printing anything yet.
That's a serious size. Yeah.
I think the first one wasn't 100.
The first one was about 75, 80. We'd planned for 100, but we didn't quite make it there.
Thus making it even more valuable.
Right.
So let's get back to the question of what you're reading and listening to. And I mean, because we are really interested in one of the things we've been doing in all of these episodes is thinking about people's process and how they work, environments, et cetera. So when obviously right now you're collaborating in the back gallery there at the ICA, when you're working on your own or at a distance, is there music on in the background? Or are you silent people while you work?
I'm not silent. Are you silent?
I'm not silent. Yeah. But it changes, it's not like one thing that we listen to. Sometimes we need dance music because we need to get up and exercise.
I listen to a lot of Steve Reich when I write, at least, because I don't know, I've listened to many of those albums over and over and over, but mostly when I'm writing. When I'm designing, I can handle other things, but that's my go-to when I need to focus in. Reading, I picked up this book by writer John McGee about writing, about the process. Yeah, you know that. So that he just put a book out recently about the process of writing, and I always think it's nice to look away from design books and look at other books. So that's been a really good book, and he talks a lot about writing around a topic, and I use that a lot in my classroom with my students. Of get out of the design books and go around your topic, and how can that influence what you're doing?
Oh yeah, I know his other work, but I don't know his
It's a
book
really
about
good
writing.
book.
Oh, that's great.
It's the process of writing. So that's been nice.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a baby, so I'm reading a lot of baby stuff right now.
Congratulations.
Yeah. How are you? Congratulations, we think. How are you incorporating your baby into your practice?
She's here right now.
She's been amazing all week.
She's been, students collaborated with her. It's definitely trying to understand how babies think and how babies respond to things. It's eye-opening, and there's that. I'm sure, I don't have a methodology yet, but I'm sure I'm applying some of that material into my teaching. How to stimulate the brain and introduce new things, and
But she is so productive. I keep saying, Arzu, we can wait, or we don't have to do this, and she's all steam ahead. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it.
It's all adrenaline.
I guess, yeah.
Okay, so what is left for the time that you have left in Maine? What is on the horizon in the next few days for you two?
We have a lecture this evening. Tomorrow, I'm hoping we can run a spread or two on the Rezo, so we leave with part of the book started. That's kind of it.
That's kind of it, yeah.
Which is enough.
Eating some freshly baked bread.
Eating bread. The students are working on a insert for the book. They're going to make 20 inserts, which will go in randomly in 20 of the books that we make. So that file will come tomorrow. So we'll see how that works in, and that will help inform our final decisions for production.
And Arzu, is this week the first week that you've seen the exhibition in person?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about quickly your response to what you've seen at the exhibition. What is your favorite area, thing?
Or the opposite.
I have to say.
Yeah, or the most hated thing.
Sure. It's difficult to hate. I've seen pictures, obviously, Instagram, people sharing photos, but I did not see the whole thing. I wasn't sure coming here. I've done 3 design inquiries, Vinyl Haven and the International, the city. And I wasn't sure how the DI-ness of DI will translate into this white cube, this institutional space. And I'm quite happily surprised that it does feel like DI. Like, I really like the unfinished, progress quality of most of the installations. I love the video room. I love the photo documentation of all the DIs. Everything is like really impressive.
It's been really nice this week to be here in space. I mean, we literally come in and unload and we move in essentially until we just can't work anymore. We've been eating in here. We've been yelling and dancing and like doing everything happens in here, and you become part of the exhibition. It's going to feel sad to leave it, knowing that when we come back again, it's not here anymore. Because last time I was here, I was able to return, knowing I was going to return. And it feels different since I was here last month, which has been really exciting.
What kinds of things have changed? Yeah, what kinds of things have changed since you were there for install and the opening?
Well, we installed this video. Our video for our current project is now installed on the back wall behind us. That's been kind of exciting. What else has changed? So Denise Gonzalez Crisp with her students. And so we actually intersected with their residency, which was a lot of fun. And so they've been analyzing the work and they made these cool contraptions on the pillars so that you could document things for your iPhone with little rocks from Steve and Pete's installation. So it's really interesting how things are changing from things that are already in the exhibition. People are taking things and moving them and rethinking them, which is so DI. Nothing is special.
And I have
to
say the smell of bread is also an excellent addition.
I'm so jealous.
You know, when the bread smells like, okay, dinner's getting ready, or so it really makes you feel at home.
Yeah.
And just for our viewers, that's the real bread smell. There's also a smell cone, but I believe they're talking about the real bread.
Here, hold up the bread.
Real bread.
Real bread.
Oh, real bread.
Sourdough.
Very jealous.
Though not for the gluten-free.
No.
Womp
Sorry.
So I think that's an interesting observation about the sort of excitement of coming into a place that was decidedly not a white cube. And I have no doubt that when one visits the ICA again, and it has reverted to the white cubeness, it will seem almost dislocating.
Yeah.
Because of that changeability and the action and the performance.
You know, I'm hoping Go ahead.
The way that people, you know, the visitors we observe, I think it's difficult to break certain habits that people are starting very shy with the work, but they warm up to it. They start touching things and interacting with things, and you know, by the time they're finishing the space, they understand what DI work is like, and they can be a part of it if they want to. It changes the gallery user behavior.
Yeah, from visitor to semi-participant.
Right. Right.
We had at our convivium that we had on Saturday, which was open to the public, and it was meant to be a kind of one day conference type event. But it was really interesting to watch people who would come in to just see the exhibition, and the way they would almost sort of shyly peer from around the pillars in the back room until eventually they were comfortable enough to make themselves present and show themselves as actually listening to the conversation that was going on. But you could tell that it took a long time. I don't think anyone actually was engaged enough to eat a donut or have a piece of pizza. It was almost like that would have been breaking the fourth wall.
Right.
Yeah. It's also been amazing to watch all the students come and go and work in the space. You know, when we started working with students on Monday morning, most of them left and went to their studio, but a lot of them stayed. There was a group making music, and people playing games. And it was just so wonderful to watch the students interacting in the space and responding to the work. They may not realize that they're reacting to the work around them, but they sure were. And it was great to be part of that and watch.
Well, Arzu and Tricia, we look forward to seeing the results of your collaboration in January. Is that correct? It'll be released at Printed Matter in New York. Do you have
a date?
Do you have a date in January?
The 17th.
January 17th at Printed Matter in New York. We'll be able to see the results of the collaboration that you've been working on here, and also some of the student work, right, that will be inserts into the publication. Thank you so much for catching us up on what's been going on this past week with you two and talking about your collaboration. It was so good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Go eat some bread for us.
Bye. We will.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Well,
bye, Gabrielle.
Bye. Well, Jimmy, what do we have up next week?
Okay. Oh, this is going to be an exciting week next week, just like every week. I feel like I say this every week. I'm so excited to talk to these people. They're like the best people ever. But I mean, I guess just every week we're just offering quality content on Universal Lunch.
It is very true.
Quality guests. Next week, this is a person whose work I've been following for a long time, and I've never had a chance to have a longer conversation with him. Next week, we're talking with Ian Lynham, and he is working on, he's an educator and also a designer, and he does a lot of publishing, and he has recently published a zine publication of sorts about the notion of critique. So I'm excited to talk to him about that. And we'll also be joined by our fellow design inquirer.
Erstwhile in resident.
The inimitable Denise Gonzalez Chris will also be joining us on next week's episode. I'm looking forward to catching up with her as well.
Yes, and although we haven't told her this yet, perhaps we can get her to drum.
What? She drums?
Yes, she's a drummer. So we'll see.
Whoa.
We'll see what we can. I will text her immediately and see if perhaps we can work in music performance into our larger conversation about design and critique.
Yeah, I hope, on Mark Maron's podcast, he's always playing his guitar for the outro. Maybe Denise can play it, drum us out next week. Absolutely.
And who knows, there might be other exciting guests who pop in because this is a conversation that is endlessly engaging, and we're delighted to have a few more weeks left. So, Jimmy, I will look forward to catching up with you again next week. And in the meantime, for everybody out there in internet land, do good work and bring it home. I'm Gabrielle Espredi in New York City.
And I'm Jimmy Lou in Austin, Texas, about to go take a nap.
And this has been Universal Lunch, Out of Office, Uncommon Hours. Join us next week. Bye.